Right, good morning, welcome back. Now today, damaged bolt rescue, like the title says, and who's ever heard the phrase, you are one sheared off bolt away from a 3-day ordeal. I think we've all been there at some point or another. You work on old vehicles, you're going to get grief at some point. So what I'd like to do today is share a few things that I do to get me out of a situation when I get a bolt that's either seized, rounded off, or sheared off. Right, first a seized bolt. We all get them, don't we? The seized bolt, it won't move. It's absolutely stuck solid. You can swing on it all you like. It's just not moving. It's getting a bit scary. It might snap off. So the first thing we reach for is the penetrating oil. There's a couple of routes you can go on that. You can use the slow stuff, something like an aerocroil. You spray a little bit on every day, give it a week. Come back at the weekend, have another go at it, and you will get it to move. This stuff creeps in under the seized thread and it will eventually release it. That's probably about as good as it gets, the aerocroil. It's a lot of money, but it's worth it because it will save you a lot of money. The other side of it, if you haven't got the time to a few days, keep tapping a bit on there, you need it done right now, then you can use something like that Rust-Off Blue Ice. That works really well. It's a freezing cold spray. You spray it for a good 10 seconds on the bolt and it will turn it blue and it will freeze it. It says on the tin, minus 45 centigrade. It fractures the rust and it will eventually allow it to crack free. So once you've got it moving, there's the next challenge. You've got the thing moving, but it's stiff. And the stiffer it is, the more dangerous it is. That can still shear off because obviously there's a lot of debris in that thread. And as you're turning it, even though it's moving, that grinding motion from metal to metal is going to get it hot. And as it gets hot, it's going to expand and well, you know the rest. So keep it cool. Use the Rust-Off Ice. Keep spraying on it. Keep that thread cool. If you just feel it. If it gets hot, that's a problem. Or even just an airline. Let it cool down. Walk away for a minute. Make sure it's not got too hot. And then it will eventually, with a little bit of in and out, you will eventually unscrew it. So that's the normal way that I deal with threads that are stuck. Just patience. Anyway, the next thing, let's talk about if you have a rounded off head on the bolt or a nut that you just can't get a socket or anything on to get a grip of it, and you start reaching for the mole grips, God forbid. Let's show you a few proper methods of doing that. Right, to demonstrate this, I'm going to make a little rig. I'm going to use a couple of slit nuts to jam this bolt in the vise completely. And then I'm going to get the head of this bolt on the grinder, take all the corners off it so it represents a rounded off bolt, properly rounded off. Right, that's the bolt jammed in the vise and the head pretty much ground off. We took nearly all the flanks off that. This is a regular 12-sided ordinary socket, 17mm, the correct size. Just spins on it. Absolutely annihilated. So the next thing, probably the best thing that you could use is this snap-on flank drive socket. And that actually has got a little bit of purchase. So let's see if that will get hold of it, a flank drive socket. Right, now in my experience, right since I did my training, a flank drive snap-on socket gets just about everything, even if they're rounded off. But this one, we've rounded it off enough that it won't. It's still slipping round. So even when your best socket slips over the top, the next thing is a temptation to reach for the vice grips. Obviously it's all chewed out and there's nothing going to get hold of it in terms of tools. Well, the vice grips are okay if you can get them in there. If this is an exhaust stud on a car engine up underneath, you're not going to get vice grips in there. You need a socket that's going to grip it. And if the best socket known to man isn't going to grip it, you need a special one. And I've got one. And these are lock-on sockets from Sealy. They've got a special feature inside them that helps them to grip a rounded off bolt. Have a close look. Now, if you look closely down inside the socket, you can see that on every other flank, you've got these 3 ridges carved into the socket. And their job is to deliberately peel a shaving of metal off the rounded bolt, like a little shaving, and jam it up inside. So all 3 of them scrape away at the rounded fastener head and gradually lock onto it. Right, now it will turn to start with, like it's slipping, and it will peel up those little shavings, and eventually it will lock. Once it locks, let's keep pulling on it until it either tears it out of the vise or shears the head off. See how we get on. And there it is. That's now twisted the head clean off. Literally, that gripped it enough to rip the head off the bolt. So if you want a socket that's going to grip a chewed up head, that's the one. Right, I don't think we can prove it more clearly than that. The best quality flank drive socket will normally get a fastener that's a little bit bruised and rounded, but when they're as rounded off as that, it took the lock-on socket to get hold of it. Now, I'll leave a link to these in the description below if you want to treat yourself to them. They're ordinary sockets. They're still flank drive, and they've got these little special features, so you can use them as regular ordinary sockets. They come in metric, imperial, and long sockets, as well as short. So there's a whole range of these if you want to treat yourself to some, and they will get you out of this problem. As you can see, not only buckled the bolt, torn it out of these 2 grip nuts, it's also ripped the head clean off. That is some grip. Anyway, imagine we're in this situation now. The penetrating oil hasn't allowed the shaft to come out of the thread, and even though we had a rounded head, even though we got hold of it with a lock-on socket, we've sheared it off and we've now got a stump. So what do we do next? All right, now in the extremely lucky event that it shears off with a big convenient lump of stud sticking out, which it never does, then you can just use a stud extractor. You slip it over the top, it locks on, and you can have a go at it again. But most of the time, these things don't work because the fact that it sheared the original head off means that a stud extractor is probably going to shear it off lower down because it's seized in the thread. And once you shear it off flush with the block, which it practically always does, then you have to start drilling it. And that's what we'll talk about next. All right, just to represent a flush sheared off bolt, let's screw a nut on there. Screw it down enough to represent there. That's roughly what it will always look like a nice little flush sheared off stud down inside the surface. You can't get anything on that to grip hold of it. So what do we do? Right, okay, to drill down into the stump, the most important thing is to drill right in the center. It's absolutely critical that you get your drill bit, if you can, right down the middle. Then when you use either an easy out or a left-hand drill bit, whatever it is, to get in there and try and remove the debris, then it will be in the middle. If it's off to one side, you can actually go in and damage the engine block, the original parent thread, and you want that intact if you possibly can, because then the job gets a lot more expensive. So to get your easy out in the middle, you need to drill a drill down the middle. To get that, you need a spot drill right in the middle. And to get that, you need a center punch first, right in the center. And there's a trick to do that. I'll show you. Right, to get a pin mark right in the center of that stump, take a nice sharp spring-loaded center punch, and you've now got to find exactly where the center is. And there's no use marking it because this might be upright on the front of an engine that you can barely see. So a simple way to do it is use another nut, because at the moment it's flush, which is how they always break off. But if it's down inside a hole, like it is now, then I can put this center punch down inside the hole, and the walls of this nut will hold the center punch in the center. So pop that on there. In fact, better still, just glue it on there, and that will sit right in the middle. Right, and once that's set, you can glue that to the side of an engine block anywhere you like, as long as it's totally central with the stud. And then you can drop your center punch in, it holds it dead in the middle, and then hit it. Right, now you've got the center punch mark right in the middle of the stud. Leave the nut in place. It guided the center punch. Use it again to guide the spot drill right down the middle to make a perfect pilot hole to guide the main drill. Right, there we are. So once you've got your pilot hole drilled, then you can get into that. If it's a 10mm bolt, as in the case of this one, then you get in there with a 5mm, then a 6, maybe a 7. And as you start to drill it out, if you can use a left-hand drill bit, then that can often bring out the debris with it. That works very well. If you haven't got left-hand drill bits, you can use easy outs. That's a left-handed twist thread. So you get it in there with a ratchet and that can bring it out. So there's all sorts of things. All of this business of rescuing damaged fasteners, it all requires a sense of humor and lots of patience and a dogged mentality to get it done, because obviously these tools will cost a bit. Things like spot drills, easy outs, stud extractors, lock-on sockets, decent quality spring punches, they're all the tools you'll need. So I'll leave some links in the description so you can read a little bit more about them and decide what you might want to invest in yourself to get on with your projects, to not keep having to stop to take things to other people to do, and have a little bit more fun with the final result. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.